Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
Plein Air magazine for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
"25,000 years ago, it is theorized that gray foxes rode mats of debris from mainland rivers to a chain of islands off the North American coast. Their populations grew as they evolved into a smaller subspecies of their mainland cousin. In the mid-20th century, the use of DDT altered the island raptor population. Bald eagles, whose diet consisted of fish and carrion, were gone. Golden eagles began to control the skies. Their diet consisted of island pig. In 1995, the fox population on one of the islands was approximately 1,300. By 1999, that number had dropped to 14. Following aggressive research, a most unlikely culprit was realized. Island foxes had become the prey base of the golden eagle, and an unbalanced ecosystem was realized.
My name is Stefan Baumann, and welcome to the Grand View. Just off the coast of Southern California lies a string of islands called Channel Islands National Park. It's home for over 2,000 species of plants and animals, 145 of which are only found here on these islands. So come along with us as we explore this fascinating and wonderful place called Channel Islands National Park.
Island foxes have only been on the Channel Islands for maybe 20 to 25,000 years. And they descended from probably one or two mainland gray foxes that made it out to the islands in some strange fashion, perhaps by rafting on large debris-choked rivers of sediment that came out from the two big rivers in the Ventura River, in the Ventura area, the Ventura River and the Santa Clara. And just by depositing maybe a pregnant gray fox on the island at that time, a new population was started. And evolution proceeded very rapidly in this case. It didn't take long for that ancestral mainland gray fox to evolve to a smaller size and to populate 6 of the 8 Channel Islands. It's amazing to think that island foxes existed for 20,000 years just fine, even though their populations went up and down probably at some point. But in the mid-1990s, their populations declined tremendously. And the reason wasn't immediately apparent. We suspected that a canine disease had gone through the population. So we actually took blood samples from all island fox populations and tested them for evidence of disease like canine distemper or parvovirus, but we didn't find any smoking gun. So in 1998, we finally got money to put radio collars on island foxes on San Miguel Island, and that proved to be the technique that worked for us. Within 4 months of putting radio collars on island foxes, our first 8 radio-collared foxes, 6 of them had died, and 4 of those had died from predation by golden eagles, which was a factor that we had not suspected. When you look at the extent of the decline, it's incredible. We went from 450 foxes on Miguel in 1994 to 14 in 1999. On Santa Rosa, we went from probably 1,300 foxes in 1994 to only 16 left in 2000. So now we find ourselves engaged in this aggressive recovery program. It's one of the park's top natural resource priorities right now, because no one wants to see these fox subspecies go extinct.
There are 40 national parks in our system that are in the marine environment, that have submerged lands with coral reefs and kelp forests in them. That's hardly known outside of the national park system. The California Channel Islands are a really interesting place on the face of the earth. It's one of the last remnants of Mediterranean ecosystems. The shoreline here actually runs east and west, so it's always looking to the south. And so it always has sunlight shining on it, no matter what time of year it is. And that sunlight drives an incredibly productive ecosystem. There's upwelling of deep ocean water off of Point Conception, right at the tip of that point that sticks out to the west. That brings nutrients from the bottom of the ocean up into the sunlight, produces one of the most productive ecosystems on Earth. Kelp forests here have kelp plants that grow 2 feet a day. You can almost watch the plants grow. And in addition to that high productivity, all the fertilizer in the water, all the sunlight driving the production of food for the whole food web. You also have high diversity because you have a mixture of the warm water and the cold water. So you have maybe 2,000 miles of the North American coast represented in the biota along this little chain of islands. And between the warm water and the cold water is a transition zone, a place where it's mixed in the temperatures, it's mixed in all of the conditions, and you have a certain group of plants and animals that live just in this transition zone. So you get very high biological diversity, very high productivity in this place.
The Channel Islands are kind of untouched, and the animals are afforded great protection here. But of course, they rely upon marine resources for their food, and of course, we harvest most of those marine resources at rather substantial levels, and so we struggle to understand why pinnipeds here are doing so very, very well on the California Channel Islands, whereas species in the north, further north in the North Pacific and in Bering Sea are declining rather dramatically. The stellar sea lions in the North Pacific are listed as an endangered species, and northern fur seals in the Pribilof Islands and in the Bering Sea, the populations are less than half what they were 4 decades ago. So those populations are not doing well. These populations have enjoyed tremendous success, and it's real intriguing to try to understand why the resource bases that these two populations rely upon are harvested at really substantial rates. We actually harvest some of our fish species here in the proximity of the Channel Islands at a higher rate than they do fish species in Alaska, and yet the animals are doing very well here versus doing very poorly in Alaskan waters. And here we are today with this, in proximity to this tremendous wildlife legacy that belongs to all the people of the world, and we're within 90 miles of downtown Los Angeles. It's just that I've been here working for so long, but that fact never ceases to amaze me.
And this is a story of Hutash, which is our name for Mother Earth. And why we believe that people have always been on this land is that Hutash planted seeds on the island of Limu. And as these seeds sprung up out of the ground, people were there. She created them. And as she taught them about the different plants and animals there on the island, she gave them many gifts. And she was married to the sky snake. We call him the Milky Way today. And he had seen all the gifts that Hutash had given the people, so he gave them a bolt of lightning. And that gave the people fire so they could sit around at night and light their night. They could stay warm and cook their food with this gift. Well, people were happy on these islands. They spread out. Santa Cruz is a very large, beautiful island. But they started getting too populated on the island, so Hutash calls them to the highest point. Today we know that point as Mount Diablo. And she says to the people, she says, I'm going to create a rainbow bridge that connects to a new land. And as you cross over on this bridge, you will find yourself in a place where you can be very happy. I've put some new plants and animals out there for you. You can spread out. And with this gift, although, there comes a warning that you must heed. That whatever you do as you cross over this bridge, do not look down. Because if you look down off the bridge, you'll fall in the waters and drown and die. Well, people gathered up on the beginning of this bridge and started to climb and cross over. There was a great fog down below, so they couldn't see the waters. It was very frightening. People were pushing and shoving and making their way across the bridge. People even looked down, and they started falling off the bridge. And as they started falling through the fog and the mist, Hutash could hear their cries for pity. And she did take pity on them. And in her generosity, she said to herself, I created these people. These are my people. I love them. So she took pity on them. And instead of letting them die, she changed them to dolphins so that they could swim and live the rest of their lives. So we see the dolphin, Alakoi, as our brothers and sisters in the ocean, and we honor them as a symbol of the Chumash people.
Well, we've spent a few days hiking around Channel Islands National Park, and there's just one word to describe this place, and that is absolutely quiet. This truly is a sanctuary, and it's hard to believe that just a short distance away is one of the most populated places in the country. This place truly is a sanctuary. So without further ado, let's paint this spectacular place. I'm going to squeeze out a little bit of ultramarine blue. So cutting my canvas into thirds. And these wonderful rocks to the right, I've got to shrink them down a little bit because they're so beautiful. I want to make sure they stay in my composition. Very dynamic. Beautiful, beautiful shapes. This almost comes right up to the horizon line. Again, I'm just mixing ultramarine blue with a little bit of turpentine. We've got a beautiful little island that's sitting right on the horizon. You can actually see the Santa Barbara Mountains in the background and the bay. Fairly easy composition. We're going to switch to a brush and we're going to look at the sky color. And as we've been out here, the sky's getting beautiful, beautiful blue. There's a bank of fog right over the Santa Barbara Mountains, which is a fairly light gray. And above that, this wonderful blue color. I'm painting the light part of the sky first. We're going to introduce more blue as we get further up towards the top of our canvas. And just mix these colors together. Okay, now we're going to clean out our brush. And we're going to mix up a gray for all this fog. And I want you to notice this little brush stroke. I'm just going to flick the brush stroke right into my wet paint. And you can just flick a little bit of the clouds into that wet paint and just blend it. This cloud bank is also highlighted. So we're going to put some highlights on top. But first I'm going to lay in the shadows. And while I have this color on my brush, I'm going to also paint the Santa Barbara Mountains back here with the same color. I want that color to be similar to my fog color, and then very lightly blend these two colors together. You can slowly get the feeling of this fog bank settling over the mountains. So I'm going to clean my brush and I'm going to get a little bit of highlight tone at this point. I'm going to be mixing my white with a little bit of yellow and just a little bit of alizarin crimson. And I'm going to mix a highlight for this fog. Just highlight along the top of the fog bank and blend it in. Okay, now with the clouds finally done, we're ready to start working on our water. So with a little bit of this viridian and blue, make sure that your horizon line is straight. And I'm going to introduce a little bit of my gray that I used in my mountains back here, so that this water looks like it disappears into the same atmosphere. I'm going to carefully go around my sketch for my rocks. I purposely didn't put a lot of detail into my rocks because what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch with the negative shape. When I originally sketched, usually I sketch all this very, very detailed. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch right now with my water. I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to rub a little bit of that off. I'm going to try to keep my rocks as clean as possible at this point. Okay, once you've resketched your rocks and pushed the paint away, we're going to start working a little bit more on the water by adding even more blue and more green. And just blend back and forth. The water is beautifully calm. And I think what I would like to do is I'd like to put a wave right behind these rocks. And I'm going to do that by adding more green and white and a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to paint a wave just arching up over this rock back here. This is the sand being stirred up right at the shoreline. And then I'm going to bring this reddish color all the way to the right-hand side of my canvas here. Okay, now with all of the sand in the water, we have to do the background mountains. Pay very close attention to the main aspects of your subject matter. Take it right down to the water line here. And with a smaller brush, I've already begun to put my rock in. And I'm going to very carefully just place it in on the horizon. Now with our base tone laid in for our peninsula, we're ready to start putting in some more of the detail. Start putting a little bit of shadow. Again, I'm just introducing just a little bit of blue. Earlier there was a little bit more definition, and I'm recalling that from my memory. Okay, now we're going to try to get a little bit more detail, and we're going to switch to a smaller brush. Little details. And now to the main rock, just to the end of the peninsula. It does get a little redder towards the edge, so I'm going to put a little bit of alizarin crimson in. And the rock underneath it is a little bit more brownish tone. Okay, now with the details done in the background mountains, we're going to start working in the foreground. Once you get the base color in very quickly, and I'm using lots of turpentine so that the paint goes on thinly, I'm going to introduce just blue to this color. And remember, I'm going to switch back and forth. I'm going to take a detail brush and I'm going to take this darker color and start laying in some of the deeper formations that I see in these rocks. Now these areas are real dark. I want to switch and be sure that I do get some of these deeper gouges in the rock. And I can see that I need to bring this rock a little closer, so I'm going to redraw it a little bit. Now I'm working on the positive shape. Remember when we started working with our water and I was talking about the negative shape in here and I was paying attention to this angle in here? That was our negative shape. This is the positive shape here. Okay, now with the shadows in, we're ready to put the highlights in on the rocks. What I'm going to do is paint the highlights opaquely, which means that I'm going to introduce white at this point. And I'm going to switch back and forth to my small brush and my big brush, just like I did with my shadows. And you could just take your finger and dab it a little bit to soften it. Pick up the angle of the rock, and since this is opaque, it will pick up some of the color from underneath and just blend it all together. I'm going to switch to my larger brush in the larger flat areas so I get a nice smooth weathered feeling. Okay, now paying a little close attention to all the little details, getting the rocks to completion. I'm going to switch to a larger brush and I'm going to mix my green and my blue together, bringing in the shadow, and I'm going to work the shadow around my rocks, and I'm going to just blend that into my base color. And notice it comes to a point just like this rock does. Mix it in with my finger. And now since I have this brush out, I'm going to just mix my sand color, which is just more white with the same colors I've been using. And I'm just literally just picking up anything that I've got on my palette. I'm using a limited palette, which is the red, yellow, and blue tone. I'm going to introduce a little wet sand, and I'm taking a little bit more blue and alizarin crimson. And I'm going along the water line, and I'm just putting in a darker variation of this gray. And I'll put in a few little footprints. Okay, now with our beach done, we're ready to do our water. And we're just going to bring some of this water up and around the rocks. Just with our fan brush. The waves just wash right up to the rock. Very lightly put little tiny spots of highlights on the water. As we go more to the left, I'm going to switch to my small brush. I'm going to work on the top of the wave. I want to create the feeling of that water just cresting. So I just want that highlight just to be along the edge. Maybe a little bit down. Have it go a little bit up again. So the fan brush, you just flick up and you get that water movement just like that, one stroke. Create the feeling of the water moving. I'm going to switch to my smaller brush. We're going to work the edge of the water. I want to reflect some of the sky colors also into my water here. I'm going to bring a little bit of shadow on the top of the wave here. Oh, I see in the distance that our boat is arriving, and that means that our day is complete. I'm going to sign the painting, and I'm going to recall this moment that we've had here at Channel Islands National Park. Expanded instructional DVDs that feature an hour-long demonstration of today's painting and other paintings in the series are available at the Grand View by calling 1-800-511-1337. Join us on our website, thegrandview.org, and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting, along with a free diagram of today's subject. Stefan Baumann's The Grand View is funded in part by
paintingfromnature.com, a website for artists seeking inspiration, advice, and knowledge to master painting from nature. paintingfromnature.com.
and by
Masterpiece Canvas, makers of fine art canvases. We supply the canvas, you supply the vision.
and by
Plein Air Magazine, for people who love painting outdoors. pleinairmagazine.com